I'm a person that looks forward more than looks back. When I started 50 years ago as an entrepreneur, the word entrepreneur I don't think existed.
The airline's the brainchild of Richard Branson, the 34-year-old millionaire head of the Virgin Records empire.
I think an entrepreneur is somebody that creates something that makes a positive difference to other people's lives. I'm a born optimist, a very positive person. Both my children have inherited that from me. And I was very lucky, I had a very happy childhood. One of the things I enjoy the most is teaching people to swim.
No, you shouldn't sink, Archbishop. You just go.
I find it quite an easy thing to do, and it's wonderfully satisfying to help them stand on their own 2 feet.
That was brilliant.
Why do you have so much money?
The exciting thing about learning to be an entrepreneur is then later on in life you can be creating not-for-profit businesses, not-for-profit things to try to deal with the problems of the world. I've been lucky enough to help create the Elders, which is a wonderful group of people that are trying to tackle conflict resolution issues in the world.
The Elders can become a fiercely independent and robust force for good.
The Oceanic Elders to try to tackle the problems of the oceans. The Carbon War Room to try to tackle climate change. My attitude in life is to give everything I can to solve the problem. Trying to go to space has been tough, very tough. The old saying, it's not rocket science. Well, obviously, if you're trying to go to space, it is rocket science. I get enormous satisfaction trying to achieve something that has never been achieved before. My favorite phrase to all the people around me is, screw it, just get on and do it. Thank you for that warm welcome. Anything wrong with this man? What? Exactly. We're not going to allow that to happen.
So, Richard, you've only been here for 3 minutes, and you're already defacing Penn property. That was a Penn tie. Thank you for that.
Well,
ladies and gentlemen, Sir Richard Branson.
Thank you. I mean, I've had 50 years trying to stop people wearing ties. I've failed. I've absolutely failed, but we'll keep trying. Anyway.
So I have to say, this is a bittersweet moment for me, because I just feel like life is more fun when you're in it. And we don't get you on campus very often. So can you walk us through a little bit how to have more fun in life while still, I don't know, earning $1 billion?
Well, I do think I'm obviously set up a lot of businesses, and I do think a lot of businesses take themselves far too seriously. I think how you spend your time at home should be, to a very large extent, how you spend your time at work. And I think it's up to the person who's running a company to be willing to let their hair down, to be willing to be the first to dance on the table in a party, to be willing to be the first in the swimming pool fully clothed, to get the parties going, to make sure everybody has a good time. And it's more fun for you. I mean, as long as you can change your clothes, you're not too wet all the time. But it's more fun for you as well. So we like to run a company run companies where everybody is looking forward to coming into work, and they don't think, ouch, it's Monday morning, I've got to go to work. And we go out of our way to try to make sure that's the case.
So how do you do that? Like if I work at Virgin, what does that mean in my everyday life?
Well, different companies experiment with different approaches. I mean, the Virgin Group, obviously you can come as you wish to dress. If you want to wear a tie, you can wear a tie. Unsurprisingly, not many people do wear ties. So first of all, you just dress comfortably, whatever you feel. If you want to work from home, you can work from home. If you want to work from home on Fridays and Mondays, you can work from home on Fridays and Mondays. If you want to take 2 months off and travel the world fully paid, you can do that. We try to have, if you want a job share, you can job share. As much flexibility as possible. And we find that people don't abuse it. In fact, if anything, we have to be careful that they don't go too far the other way. Because if you give them a lot of trust, they're really careful not to abuse it. And you're just treating people as adults. Now, if you run an airline, it's slightly more difficult. Don't think I'm going to turn up for 2 months to fly the planes. So obviously, we have to have slightly different, we have to have slightly different rules for, say, pilots or cabin crew. But with people working for things like offices, there's no reason at all why you can't run a company like that. And we've been doing it now for a while, and it works.
So let's talk about airlines a little bit. One of my all-time favorite quotes was when you said, if you want to be a millionaire, it's really simple. First be a billionaire and then start an airline. Why is this industry so hard and so broken?
Well, when we started in this industry, there was Pan Am. There was with 300 planes. There was TWA with 300 planes. There was Air Florida with 300 planes. There was People Express with a couple of hundred planes. There was British Caledonia. Anyway, and so it goes on. And not one of those names exists today. And we actually had one plane against all these. So, on paper, people thought we'd have no chance at all of surviving. I remember Lord King, who ran British Airways, said, too old to rock and roll, because I've been in the record business, too young to fly. He won't last a year. Anyway, that was 35 years ago. And I think the reason that Virgin Atlantic survived and all these others disappeared was because we were different. I mean, one other quote he said was, how on earth can somebody from the entertainment business entertain going into the airline business? And of course, in those days, airlines didn't entertain you. I mean, you got a lump of chicken dumped in your lap. If you were lucky, they might have shown one sort of grainy film on a big screen. The cabin crew hated their jobs. They hated the fact that people were complaining all the time because there were no vegetarian meals or macrobiotic meals, all the things that people had promised that they would have. And they got grumpy. And so, when we threw into that mix a 747 with stand-up bars and fun stuff and all, we were 6 years ahead of anybody else putting seatback videos and made sure that our staff had all the tools to do a great job. Then when British Airways launched that, and most of these people are too young to know this, but they launched the infamous Dirty Tricks campaign to drive us out of business. But we only had 4 planes at the time, and they went to extraordinary lengths to get rid of us. They had teams of people, sneaking out early in the morning and going through my rubbish bins at my home, and they got caught doing that one day, trying to find anything incriminating. We had a gay nightclub. They would go through the bins at the gay nightclub looking for needles so they could then sell the story to the News of the World, which was one of Murdoch's rags. And they did find a needle, and they did sell a story to the News of the World. But we survived that one. And then they would, try to spread stories in the press about our finances. I suspect they were true because it's tough running an airline, but anyway, they were trying to spread them. And then they set up, then this was really bad. They set up a department behind locked doors with a team of people that illegally accessing our computer information, and they were illegally accessing computer information, finding out the names of our passengers, ringing them up, pretending to be from Virgin, and telling them that, we're ever so sorry, but the flight's been cancelled today, and then switching them to BA. And unfortunately, one of the people in that computer organization felt so badly about what he was doing that he came and saw us about it. Anyway, we took them to court. We won the biggest libel damages in history. It was Christmas time, so we handed them out to all our staff equally. It was known as the BA, British Airways Christmas bonus. And I must admit, when I came out of the court, I was, wow. we felt so good. And then we thought, we just took the mickey. I don't know if you have that phrase in America. Anyway, we pulled their tail quite a bit. There was one occasion where they decided to sponsor the London Wheel, which is the massive wheel just opposite the House of Commons. And I got a call at 6 in the morning, and I was told they'd had technical problems, but they'd flown in all the world's press from everywhere to watch this wheel go up. And so we happened to have an airship company, and we scrambled this airship, and it flew over the wheel at about 9 o'clock that morning. And I don't know whether we've got the picture, but they... Anyway, so we basically, having won the court case, we had a lot of fun. We dressed up as pirates and we took over their Concorde. And anyway, we just went. We were a real pain in the ass for a while. And I think again, if you've got a company you believe in, and you can do things and make people smile, make people laugh, get on the front pages of the paper rather than the back pages. That wherever it was, that was a lot cheaper than taking a whole lot of full-page adverts and saying how wonderful we were. And I think it built Virgin up into a fun brand, which meant that we could sort of stretch it into a lot of different areas over the years.
That's one of many examples of you just hating monopolies and bureaucracies. Is this something you remember as a child? Just this deep distaste for giant companies and a desire to poke at them a little bit? Or how did you develop that passion?
As a child, business in Britain was run by, it was almost like Soviet Russia. It was dominated by companies that were run by governments. So British Gas, British Coal, British Steel, British Airways, British Rail, etc. And governments, they not only don't know how to run countries, but they don't know how to run companies either. And they definitely don't know how to run companies. And Yeah, so for instance, with British Rail, you know, I went along to, well, I got the head of British Rail to come and see me first of all, and said to him, you know, wouldn't it be more exciting if British Rail was broken up into smaller units and people like myself and others could run chunks of it? And we had a very amiable conversation. I'll tell this story in my book. He then left the room, and as he was leaving the front door, the intercom got stuck on, and booming all over the house was, "I'm not going to let that fucker Branson get his hands on our rail network." So I think we got the message that he didn't actually want us to take over rail. Anyway, turn the clock forward a couple of years. We did end up taking over the biggest chunk of Britain's rail network, and I think, you know, we did what we did to rail, what we did to the airline business. We made it fun. We brought in brand new, you know, high-speed Pendolino trains, and you know, in order to, you know, get the staff who'd worked for the government for years, you know, to kickstart them into the Virgin philosophy, I invited all 20,000 of them out to a massive party in the countryside. We made it a 4-day weekend party. They brought their children. They brought their tents, or we arranged tents. We had bands playing. We had log fires at night time. People playing guitars, and you know, by the end of the weekend, they'd had a blast. They went back. They'd become Virgin people. And you know, they've been loyal ever since. And on the West Coast Main Line in Britain, we've managed to increase the numbers from 8 million to 40 million people using that track. And it's so busy that we thought the other day maybe we needed quicker trains, and you know, hence Virgin Hyperloop and a new announcement that we just made last week.
So you do have this new book out, 2 decades after the previous autobiography.
Sorry if I offended anybody with that word. I was just suddenly thinking, I went after it to come out of the mouth. I thought, oops. Anyway.
I think there's a phrase that you're fond of. I think it's "screw it, let's do it." So we'll go with it. But I'm curious. I was puzzled when I read the title, because my understanding was that when you lose your virginity, you can't find it again, right? It's gone. So what is this about? Why did you write this book?
Well, we're still looking. We're still looking. There. No, I think. Look, I love trying things for the first time, and even even if I'm sort of groping my way to try to learn about things, I like. I don't know. I mean, the very first time, for those people who didn't read my first book, it was, you know, losing my virginity was obviously a pun on the company, but my experience of losing my virginity was interesting. When I'd finished, I thought that I
need that microphone.
I thought people were meant to stop having orgasms, but anyway, she carried on and on and on, and and I was beating my chest by then, thinking, my God, what a man I am, and so I sort of get back onto the bed, and and she whispers to me, asthma attack. And I go, oh no, it's nothing to do with me. And anyway, half an hour later, the ambulance arrives, and I was put back in my box. Right, where were we?
That is not the answer I was expecting or looking for. So there's a new book.
Yeah. I'm not going to be invited back here again, am I? I know. New book, yeah. So as I was saying, I love trying things for the first time. The new book is about the last 20 years since the first book, and you know, I'm very lucky. Because I love trying things for the first time. I'm known as Dr. Yes, and it gets me into a lot of trouble. So it makes for a good read as a book, but it also means that I end up learning about an awful lot of different things in life, and every day I see as another day, another wonderful day of learning something new. And you know, at the end of the book, I've had a final chapter about the 75 ways I've tried to kill myself in my life, and how I've ended up failing. But even those 75 lives that 75 lives that I nearly lost, each one of them was a great, you know, was a wonderful, exciting episode. But the problem is, if you try things for the first time, sometimes, and nobody's tried it before, you're sometimes taking risks. So, yeah, so I've been pulled out of the sea 5 times by helicopters. I think I've got the Guinness World Record just for the most times being rescued by helicopter out of the sea. I sponsor London's ambulance helicopter service to say thank you very much to all helicopters who ever pulled me out of the sea. And anyway, there are a lot of other stories like that. But amidst the adventure side, you know, there's obviously the deadly serious side of building some really fun businesses and taking some of the biggest companies in the world.
So I do want to hear about adventure. So you have, what, 7 Guinness Book of World Records for hot air ballooning, for kiteboarding across the English Channel. I have a lot of questions, but the first one is why? Like, why do you do this?
Because I would hate somebody to have come to me and said, would you like to be the first person to fly around the world in a balloon? Or the first person to cross the Atlantic in a hot air balloon, and for me to sit back, you know, 2 years later, having said no, and watch somebody else do it. So, you know, I you know, I mean, when somebody did come to me and say, you know, how about us, the 2 of us, being the first to cross the Atlantic in a hot air balloon, and I said, well, when are you thinking of going? And he said, in 2 months' time. And I said, well, I can't fly a hot air balloon. And he said, well, 2 months' time, you can get your ballooning license. And anyway, yeah, 2 months later, I found myself sitting at Sugarloaf Mountain in Maine, ready to climb into the biggest balloon ever built, and heading off on a spectacular adventure. And yeah, it all went wrong at the end, but we did get across the Atlantic.
Touché. And after that...
And of course, he jumps out. He's the experienced balloonist of 25 years. He jumps out of the balloon. I'm left flying this balloon on my own. But anyway, you have to read the book to find out about that, but it was a little bit hairy.
We won't spoil it, but that wasn't the end of the altitude. So you then decide, I'm going to go into the spaceflight business. What was that about?
Well, let me ask a question. How many people would like to go to space in this room? Okay, I think there's your answer. I think 80% of any group I meet of people that I would love to go to space. We'd all love to go to space, I think, or you know, there's a few exceptions. If we could be reasonably sure about a return ticket, and if we could afford it. And so, over the last 12 years, we've been trying to build a space line, and it's not been easy. We never thought it would be easy. In fact, it's been even tougher than we thought. We've got 700 of the best engineers in America, quite a few from NASA, and you know, we've had tears, but I think we're on the verge of achieving everything we've dreamt and over the next 60, 90 days, VSS Unity, which is our first spaceship, should be in space, and then quite soon after that, I'll go to space, and then a lot of people, a lot of other people over the years to come will have a chance to go to space, and we're building a spaceship. I mean, it's come on, it's exciting if you're able to do if you're able to build a spaceship and a space line. We're building 4 spaceships. We've got a beautiful spaceport in New Mexico. We've got a wonderful mothership. Design is very important in everything we do at Virgin. I mean, they're beautifully designed. We've got wonderful test pilots who are going to be the brave people to take it through its paces, and then they will become astronauts taking people up. We've got a company called Virgin Orbital, which will be putting, hopefully, thousands of satellites around the Earth. And we're going to be planning to put a couple of thousand satellites around the Earth in about 3 years' time, which will help connect the 4 billion, 5 billion people who are not connected. Because we're the only company of the people who are pushing into space who've got a spaceship designed like an airplane, the others have got straightforward rockets. Expanding that to go to point-to-point travel is something which is very possible. Oh, well, let's have a break from listening to me. We'll shove the video on.
Exploration of space will go ahead, and it is one of the great adventures of all time. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Many years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory on Mount Everest was asked why did he want to climb it. He said because it is there. Well, space is there, and we're going to climb it.
Virgin Galactic aspires to be the world's first commercial space line. So what does that mean? It means not just that we're operating a single space vehicle, but that we're creating an incredible experience for our customers. And it means that many of the things that we do have never been done before.
Space from above. Every astronaut I've talked to, that changes them. From above, you don't see state and country borders. You see the Earth's resources as fragile environment. The more people that see that themselves, the more they'll make that part of their daily lives. And I hope by the time my kids are ready to go into space, we've changed our global culture to recognize that space is where we belong, and the Earth is something that needs to be a little better protected.
Nine, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
That, so I painted a sort of picture of, being in business should be fun, and of course, with businesses, there's also a deadly serious side. I think the fun aspect can actually, improve the safety of, I mean, if you have airlines, if the engineers, love the company. If each individual airplane in an airline company has a personal name, so people actually know, it's not just a number, it's a name. All these things are important, I think, in building up the sort of safety culture of an airline. We've had 3 airlines which we've run for 35 years in total, and we've never had an incident. And obviously, safety is the number one important thing. In building a space line, there are risks, and most things you can, your engineers, everything can test on the ground. There are some things that can only be tested in the air. And 4 years ago, or 3.5 years ago, one of our test pilots made a mistake, or one of the test pilots made a mistake, and it was a catastrophic mistake. And as an owner of a company where there's been an accident, and I obviously again write about it in my book. The most important thing is confront it, straight away. I was on Necker Island at the time. I got the call. Got on a plane, got to the Mojave Desert as quickly as I could, and just to be with your people. I mean, all 600 engineers had seen the accident, and they were all feeling ghastly. First of all, they'd spent 8 years working on this project. It was just about there, and fortunately, we had cameras everywhere, and we could see what had happened, and I was able to talk to them all to tell them that it wasn't their fault, that they'd done a wonderful job in creating very safe craft, and then some people are religious, some people are not religious. I think we decided the biggest hug in history was the way to deal with it. So all 800 of us had a massive hug, and we then we all basically decided together, we're not going to give up now. We're going to carry on. And the 700 astronauts who'd signed up, bar about 5, stuck with it. We had people like the president of Iceland's wife rang up and booked a ticket the very day of the accident, just as a goodwill gesture, and we had some lovely, wonderful gestures as well. There were not so nice things, which again I write about in the book. There are elements of the press that just love to see people fall flat on their face, and we just had to deal with that, and brush it off. But anyway, 3.5 years later, the team had done a fantastic job, and we're now right back on track again.
You went through another harrowing experience this fall. You could have left Necker. You chose to stay there through Hurricane Irma in a basement with a bunch of your team. What was that like, and where do we need to go on disaster relief now?
Wow, the world seems to be. I was in San Francisco yesterday, meant to be throwing our first Virgin Sporting event in San Francisco, and that got cancelled because of the fires in Sonoma and Napa Valley. And so there certainly are. The hurricane is hitting the UK today. Almost unheard of. And what is happening, I believe, is that the sea is getting hotter. The world is getting hotter, and it doesn't seem to take much increase in heat before hurricanes become more intense. And I know you have a sort of solar energy. You've got a division in this university of people who are looking into all this, and the sooner we can have breakthrough technologies, the better. But yeah, we got a force, effectively a Category 7 hurricane There isn't a Category 7, but technically it would have been a Category 7 if there was, hit us. And it was ferocious. And you know, it looked like a nuclear bomb had hit us. And I've spent with my son and daughter the last 6 weeks trying to, I've just come from Washington the day before, about 3 days ago, seeing the World Bank, seeing the IMF, seeing the International American Development Bank, and to try to sort of rally support, not just for the British Virgin Islands, but for the whole Caribbean. I mean, Puerto Rico, a whole lot of islands have been completely trashed, and also with trying to turn the Caribbean into a clean energy, now from dirty energy, with small micro grids, so that they don't just lose all their energy for 9 months, as looks like it's going to happen on some of the big islands in the Caribbean. Our solar panels on our island, we had our electricity back and running the next day, whereas people who were relying on diesel, they're looking at a nine month to fix their problems. So out of, when adversity hits, you just got to try to come back with something better than was there before. Our house got burnt down. Again, I wrote about it in the book 7 years ago. And we made sure that, the new house that we built was a lot better and a lot stronger, and romance blossomed from it. So, there's often good things come out of bad.
I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about the Council of Elders that you set up with Nelson Mandela, and what role that's playing in the world today, and how you think about how a group of people who really just stands on the respect and credibility that they've earned can really drive change.
Well, there were two of us who Peter Gabriel, who was one of our artists on Virgin, he had a similar idea, and I had an experience. We put the two ideas together, and we formed the Elders. My personal experience was there were some hostages in Iraq, and this was some time ago, and Saddam Hussein had these hostages, and I knew King Hussein of Jordan, and I asked him if he could have delivered to Saddam Hussein a letter from myself, but endorsed by King Hussein, to see if we could bring some medical supplies into Iraq and bring any hostage that was not completely well back out again, and the young people as well. And surprisingly, he agreed to do so. So we flew in with a 747 full of volunteers from England. And in those days, we only had 4 planes. And the airport hadn't been used for 2 years. The lights went on at the last minute. An airport as big as Heathrow with not one plane on it. It was quite an eerie feeling. And Saddam Hussein came to the airport and handed over the hostages, and we took off and we left. And it was a wonderful feeling. And then put the clock forward a few years later. George Bush Jr. and Tony Blair decided to invade again, and I knew people who had been involved in looking for these weapons of mass destruction, and talking to them, they just said, "It's bollocks. There are no weapons of mass destruction." So we were doing everything we could to try to stop the war, and we contacted Saddam Hussein. He was willing to have Nelson Mandela come and meet him, with our idea that we would then try to persuade him to step down in the interests of the Iraqi people, and go and live elsewhere, and avoid a horrible war. And Mandela said he would do it if we could get Kofi Annan to join him. And Kofi Annan then agreed to join him. And the day before they were due to fly, the bombing started, and so the trip never took place. And the Iraqi war has cost hundreds of thousands of lives and maimed hundreds of thousands of people. Has resulted in ISIS. The whole Syrian conflict, I don't think would have happened without it, and so on. So, we then spoke with Nelson Mandela and said, look, it may be if you'd got there 2 days sooner, you may have been able to avert that war. So maybe, would you be willing to be the founding father of a new group of elders that you appoint, that look for the 12 people in the world that you think have the highest moral standing, who are in maybe the last 15 years of their lives, who are no longer interested in party politics, and he agreed to found the elders, and he appointed people like President Carter from America, Mary Robinson from Ireland, Kofi Annan, Archbishop Tutu, Ban Ki-moon's just joined, and others, and incredible group of people, and over the last 10 years, they've gone into conflict regions and knocked heads together, I think avoided some conflicts. They've done their best to stop other conflicts that have already started. And they've also used their moral authority to speak out on issues that they feel very strongly about. Last week they said that what Trump had done in trying to rip up the Iran nuclear deal, they felt was a ghastly mistake, and they spoke out about it. They've set up organizations like Girls Not Brides to try to encourage countries to stop 12-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 10-year-olds being married off, and trying to encourage young girls to be able to go to school. They were in the Paris talks last year, campaigning to push the climate talks through. And some of these people, they're 85, 86, 90, 92 years old, but they've got tremendous moral authority, and people listen to them.
You say something really interesting in the book. You say, if your life is one long success story, you're most likely a liar. And you've had no shortage of failures in your life. I think of, Virgin Cola, clothing, cosmetics. I'm sure you could make a much longer list, but could you, for an audience of people that's often terrified of failure, could you talk to us a little bit about how you think about that and how you continue to take risks?
Well, I could have added, it also makes for a much better book if you've got a little bit of ups and downs, because there's nothing worse than reading somebody's autobiography where all they include is all these lovely successes that go from one step to another. As I said earlier, I love to say yes. I love to try things, and sometimes fall flat on my face, sometimes succeed. I think because we generally start things from scratch, we haven't had any sort of massive dramatic failures that have really sort of damaged the foundations of Virgin. So we generally speaking, if we start a bank or a financial service company, we'll just literally start in a very small way and then build it up from there. If we start an airline, we start with one plane and we build it up from there. Generally, because we've created companies that are much better than our rivals, generally the public, identify with them, and generally, and more often than not, it's successful. Where we've come unstuck is where we've taken on a big Goliath, Coca-Cola, and your product just can't be fundamentally better. I mean, it can be, some people may say it tastes better, some people, but for a year, when we took on Coca-Cola, I thought, Christ, we're going to be the biggest brand in the world. We're outselling Coke, we're outselling Pepsi in every store in Britain, and so I got a Sherman tank and I drove into Times Square in New York and turned the turret on the Coca-Cola sign, which we'd had pyrotech wired up the night before, and it looked like we blew up the sign. Anyway, Coca-Cola weren't amused, understandably, and what happened, and I only found this out because about 2 years after, my new bank manager at Lloyd's Bank in England invited me out for dinner, and she happened to be the woman who was behind this back at Coke 2 years earlier. She went in to see the chairman of Coke, or the president of Coke, and said, this little virgin brand, we got to take them seriously. They're outselling us in Britain, and like a bush fire, it could catch on. It could take us around the world. And so he initially didn't take us seriously. Then a month later, he looked at the new set of figures. He then called her in and said, right, there's a DC-10 on the runway at Atlanta Airport. It's full of cash. It's full of SWAT teams. You're going to lead the charge. You're going to England, and I want you to snuff them out. And Virgin Cola just disappeared from the shelves of Tesco's everywhere. It just suddenly disappeared. And we had no idea why people were taking it off. We would ring retailers and protest, and they wouldn't let us know. And it wasn't until 2 years later that we found out what had happened. And anyway, we were kneecapped. And the problem was that with British Airways, when we had a similar thing, our product was better, and so we survived. But with a can of cola, anyway, we lost that battle.
So you have a friend, Barack Obama, who recently went dark on social media and then popped up grinning, kiteboarding with you. And I think there are a lot of people in this room who are curious about, like, what did you talk about, and what was that like? Well,
what I feel like I could say I talked about, I've included in the book. It was the day after he stepped down. He and Michel deserved a holiday. They'd really had no proper holiday for 8 years. He deserved to get out on the water. He used to be a surfer. I said I would teach him to kite surf, and he learned with a vengeance. And basically, they had 10 days where they let their hair down. They were as delightful as one could imagine, not knowing them personally. They were the kind of people who, by the end of the 10 days, they knew every single staff member's name, personally. Instead of, they insisted on throwing a party for all the local staff on their last night there. A couple of staff members I noticed were standing in the corner. Nobody was dancing with them. I saw Barack and Michel go straight to them and drag them onto the dance floor. And anyway, just exceptional people. And as citizens of the world, I think the whole world looked up to them, and we saw them as our president, and as much as Americans, I think, saw them as their president. And we were very proud of America. I thought it was a shining light to the world, and it was sad they stepped down.
So we have a bunch of great audience questions. We'll try to get through as many of these as we can. So we'll aim for rapid fire here. One is, what's the worst piece of career advice you've ever received?
I never really thought of myself as having a career as such. Let me think. Worst piece of career advice. I'm a dyslexic as well. Help me explain what that would mean to me. Career advice.
Did you have people talking you out of becoming an entrepreneur, out of going into businesses that succeeded?
So my dad, I must admit, walked me when I was 15. I decided to leave school. And I wanted to leave school because there was another unjust war, talking about wars. And something that students should really examine is, why so many of the wars, the Vietnamese War was the most awful war. There's a wonderful film that everybody should see called Fog of War by Robert McNamara that he made on his deathbed 6 months before he died. And he made it because he wanted Bush Jr. not to invade Iraq. He could see that exactly the mistake that America had made invading North Vietnam was going to be made again by Bush Jr. And it was very powerful. And I wish that George Bush Jr. had taken heed. But anyway, my dad walked me around the garden, as dads should do when a 15-year-old says, I'm going to quit school. And the first time round, I think his advice was to stay at school, and I think that was a bad advice. Anyway, on the third time round, he said, "You know something, Richard? I didn't know what the hell I was going to do when I was 22. You know what you want to do when you're 15. Give it a go, and if it doesn't work out, we'll try to get you a formal education again." So it turned into good advice.
You mentioned dyslexia. What was it like growing up with some of those challenges, and what do you feel are the advantages?
It's funny, we climbed a mountain last week in Morocco called Mount Toubkal, and Simon Simonek I was walking with up the mountain, and we were trying to think, why is dyslexia called dyslexia? I mean, first of all, dyslexics can't spell, so why have a name that you can't spell? Secondly, you can't read, so why have a name you can't pronounce? And this was an 18-hour climb up the mountain and back down again, and by the end of it, we came up with alternative thinker as an alternative for the word dyslexia. And I'm going to blog about it this week and see if people can come up with any other better names than alternative thinker. But when you're young and you're suffering from dyslexia, you don't realize that it's potentially a blessing. You just find that it's difficult doing the basic things that are shoved down your throat, when you're young at school. And when I was young, I just thought I was thick, and the school definitely thought I was thick and stupid. But as I got older, I realized that it was a blessing. I mean, it taught me the art of delegation, because I think I'm one of the best delegators I know, and I try to encourage other entrepreneurs who are setting up their businesses to, find somebody else to replace them, put yourself out of business. That means you can then think about the bigger picture, and you can move on to the next project, and then put yourself out of business again, and keep repeating that. And so many entrepreneurs are not good delegators. So being dyslexic, I had to be a good delegator. Being dyslexic, I have to simplify everything. So when people deal with Virgin, we speak in quite a simplistic way, and we get our messages across very clearly. We don't use jargon. We don't use PowerPoints. We use pictures. We use videos. We don't, if we're in the financial service industry, we don't use phrases like bid offer spread, which nobody understands, so yeah, we say it like it is, and I think that has really helped build Virgin over the years.
You've named Steve Jobs as the entrepreneur you admire most, and I'm wondering what you admire about him, and also how you feel about the way he treated other people.
I think look, he built the most extraordinary company, and I mean, I used to lug around suitcases full of paperwork, and I don't have back problems anymore thanks to Steve Jobs. I can now got this, one little iPad, and it's all there. But yeah, his fault was that he didn't seem like a great motivator of people. He didn't sound like he was a great praiser of people, and he micromanaged. But it worked. So although we don't run our companies like that, it's somehow worked for him. I mean, there's a lot of people I admire, and I wouldn't necessarily put him on a complete pedestal, but he's created something extraordinary.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot more for Virgin to still do in terms of the number of industries you could enter, the number of companies you could disrupt. What are the industries that are kind of piquing your interest lately, and where might we look to see you go in the next few years?
I don't necessarily know. I mean, that's the exciting thing about Virgin. We'll see something that frustrates us, and we'll think, Christ, we could do it better, and we'll dive in and do it. But we are. I mean, for instance, I would never go on a cruise ship. So we've decided to build 3 beautiful cruise ships that I would like to go on, and that my friends would like to go on, and I suspect everybody in this room would have a blast on as well. I'm going to lay the keel in Italy next week of the first of those, and in a couple of years' time, they'll be there. I actually, when I was 25, wanted to build a cruise ship that I would like to go on, and it was going to be for under 30-year-olds, and then when I got to 31, it was going to be under 31-year-olds, 32-year-olds, 33-year-olds, 34-years-olds. Anyway, so finally we're there. Hopefully, under 70-year-olds. It's going to be a really fun cruise ship. This. Yeah. So I mean, I mentioned Hyperloop is something which I'm excited about. To have a train that travels at, could travel up to 1,000 miles an hour, but I mean, realistically, if you're not going to be sick going around the corners, sort of 650, 600 miles an hour, but it's faster than a plane, and there are quite a lot of places in the world that will benefit from Virgin Hyperloop, and that we've just announced, and we'll most likely be building our. I mean, well, we've got the test site in the Nevada desert. It's going extremely well, and hopefully I think I'll do our first one in the Middle East in about 18 months' time. Start building. Anyway, we're building Virgin hotels in a number of cities in America. Again, I very rarely in a city do you find a hotel that is just got it right, and I think we experimented with one hotel in Chicago. It's Condé Nast Traveler's best hotel in America, and we're now rolling it out into Nashville and New York and San Francisco and other places, and just trying to make very Virgin and really fun to go in. But most of my time nowadays is spent on the not-for-profit ventures. So it's tackling, using the fact that I can pick up the phone to most people in the world and they'll take my call. I'm not sure the White House would, but most people in this world, and get through. And if you get yourself into that position in life, then you don't want to waste that position. You want to try to use it to try to create more marine reserves in the world, to try to protect the species that are in peril in the world. Try to change drug regulation to regulation that's sensible, and so on. I mean, there's just so many problems in this world that need sorting. Last week, we helped set up a fund for people in America who don't get bail. I mean, you've got this ridiculous situation in America where the rich, they commit a big crime, they just write out a check, and they go free for a year or two waiting for their trial. The poor, they're sent straight to prison, whether they're guilty or innocent, and a lot of them are innocent, and they languish in prison, and they lose their jobs, and they maybe lose their family, and so we've helped set up a fund that can lend money to these people. But I mean, that shouldn't be necessary. Government should realize that the law is an arse in this area and sort it out.
So there are people in the room wondering, I'm not going to ask you about your favorite cheese or about what it's like to be so cool, but
you can ask that.
I do want to say that you have a remarkable habit of writing things down. And I think the first time we met was a couple years ago at a dinner. There were maybe 30 CEOs there, and you were the only one taking notes. And people are looking around like, Richard Branson is taking notes? Like, why is no one else? I just wondered if you could tell us why.
Well, it may go back to my dyslexia, but actually, I actually think it's good for people whether they're dyslexic or not. I think I can't. I see sort of managing directors of companies sort of walking around their business, talking to their employees, and almost every employee has an idea, and they'll nod and they'll say, what a great idea. But I know that they're not going to remember that idea the next day, and if they don't write it down, they're not going to do anything about it. And so, that whatever the suggestion was, often, something that it keeps going wrong, will keep going wrong. If I'm having a meeting with people, I look around the room sometimes, and that maybe in a meeting 20 different ideas come up. I know at least 19 of those 20 ideas will never get actioned if people don't take notes. And actually leaving a sort of a secretary to take notes and then distribute them, somehow I think that when you write them down, you're going to more likely to deal with them and remember them. So, so I'll write these things down. I mean, I think one of the reasons I think Virgin Atlantic and Virgin America and were such exceptional airlines and now such exceptional airlines is because we worry about the details. I mean, if you get every single little detail right, then the people who work for the company will be so proud and so happy with the company. They won't have customers complaining because every little detail is sorted, and they can afford to smile. They can afford to have a good time. So I think, I do think note-taking is one of the best bits of advice I can give to people.
We have a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs in the room. You were just on Shark Tank here in the US. What advice would you give to people who want to start companies, and what do you look for when you invest?
What advice? I mean, if somebody feels they've come up with an idea that's going to make a real positive difference to other people's lives, which is basically what a company is, I would say, just screw it, just do it and get on. Don't waste your time. And if you're at college, start it from here. Don't wait necessarily till you leave college. You can start the whole process here. You'll have lots of people that you can work with on your project. So gather a wonderful group of people around you who believe in your idea, and just give it a go. And your first company, you're going to learn an awful lot. I mean, the first company, you're going to learn almost everything there is to running a business, how to deal with people, how to motivate people, how to praise people, never criticize people, always look for the best in people. You know, if you can run one company, you know, I mean, I think I've proven this, but, you know, if you can run a student magazine, you know, you can run a record company. If you can run a record company, you can run an airline. If you can run an airline, you can run a health club chain. If you can run a health club chain, you can run a mobile phone company. I mean, if you can run a mobile phone company, you can run a bank, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's all about people, and that's all it is. And, you know, if you're going to run an airline, you know, get the chief technical officer of a rival airline to come and run it for you, so you know you're running a safe airline. And then, you know, once you've got your team in place, you know, give them the freedom to make mistakes, give them the freedom to do good things, give them the freedom to create magic. Don't criticize them when they mess up, and don't think that that they're going to do everything exactly as you would do it. You know, sometimes they'll do things better than you do it, and you'll be pleasantly surprised. Sometimes they'll do things not quite like you'd do it, or maybe not quite as good, but the fact that you've delegated means you're going to be able to achieve a hell of a lot more.
So as we wrap up, I love in the book this image of you. Somebody goes onto a Virgin plane and opens the luggage compartment, and you roll out. Should that happen to one of us, I understand that you don't like handshakes. How should we greet you instead?
Well, I mean, fist bumps, I learned from Obama, and I'll tell you what, 1 out of every 100 Americans, and it's only Americans, they take your hand and they look you in the eyes, and they look like they're going to, you know, I mean, there's no bones are going to be left in your fingers, and they feel that this, you know, this is the way to say I really love you, and it's like, oh fuck. So that's why I think I prefer the fist bump these days. But I'm pretty good at telling. I mean, I walk up to these people, and I look at them, I think, you know, so I'll take a risk with quite a few, and then there's just occasionally it's sort of getting experience in that. But so you've the Sheryl Sandberg book. Well done. It was great. He did that.
Thank you.
But there has to be a punchline to that. It was #1 last week, but in the business books. But
who invited this guy?
I'm sorry. It just sort of dropped down a bit. I don't know. I'm sure he'll come back next week.
Oh, we'll be back. Don't worry.
He writes really well. He does.
I will say, like, that part notwithstanding, we've been thrilled to have you here in Philly.
Anyway,
and
thanks very much.
We're delighted that you came. Just before we thank Richard formally, he did come here to Philadelphia, and there's a Philadelphia experience that people need to have. Can we roll the video here? Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you.